The problem is that we all remember this.
He's 5 for 5, looking for 6 for 6, and then
Tomac! And down, and slow to, it's going for the motorcycle, and he's not. Tomac, he's holding his wrist, or his left side. I cannot believe this.
Oh, brutal crash for Eli Tomac. And look, he was as dominant could get at the beginning of that 2015 season. He was winning motos by over a minute at times. He had won the first 5 going away, and that was moto number 6, and it all came undone. And because of that, he got this reputation as a guy who hangs it out too much, who tries to demoralize the competition with huge leads, a checkers or records kind of guy. In fact, a couple of weeks ago in a post-race press conference, he was asked, have you changed from the old days where you were a checkers or records kind of guy? Which is actually a ridiculous question, because Eli Tomac is not checkers or records. In fact, Eli Tomac is one of, if not the most durable and healthy and injury and crash-free riders in the history of the sport. Really? Eli Tomac? Beast mode guy? The guy that crashed out in 2015 when he had a huge lead? That's what we're going to discover in this video, and it's brought to you by anti-gravity batteries. Now, here's the cool thing about anti-gravity batteries. First, they're used by a lot of the top teams in the sport, including the 2 teams that Eli Tomac has done the most winning for, Monster Energy Kawasaki and Monster Energy Yamaha Star Racing. Also, a lot of the GNCC guys use anti-gravity batteries, which is super key because they have dead engine starts. The faster your engine fires, the better start you will get. They know anti-gravity batteries provide a ton of power. Now, there are small case batteries that the race teams use, which are extremely light and extremely small. Or you can get a battery that's essentially the same size and weight as an OEM battery, but it has a lot more power than the OEM battery and even has built-in jump starting in it. So if you're like me and you don't do any sort of maintenance on your bike and your battery dies, the built-in jump starter will get you going. And there is a much larger jump starter that can pretty much start anything. So check out anti-gravity batteries, and we thank them for the support on this podcast. And I'm sure Eli Tomac is pumped that whether he was on a Cowie or a Yamaha, when he hit the electric start button, it was going to start, which is a big part of being consistent. By the way, like and subscribe to these videos as well, so I can keep them going for you. Now, really, Eli Tomac, Mr. Consistency? How can this be? Well, when he crashed out of that 2015 season, and here's a fun fact about that clip, by the way, that crash actually took place while we were away at commercial break. So those watching with the internet coverage that is subscribed to that package saw that crash live. But our producer, Chris Bond, thought it would be terrible to come back from commercial break and the TV audience would only get to see the most dramatic moment of the season as a replay. So he did what we like to call moving the island, and we actually played it back when we came back from commercial as if it was live, and then Langston and I called the crash again. And if you look at the clip closely, we kind of start announcing that he was crashing maybe a second or 2 early.
6, and then
And down.
Oops. Look, it was a big moment. We were excited. That crash right there, that stamped the reputation that Eli Tomac was a crasher, but my gosh, is he not. He started the next year, 2016, and made all the races that year, and then made all the races the next year, and showed up at all the races the next year, the next year, the next year. As a matter of fact, I'm not a saber mathematician. I'm not going to change the sport of baseball or basketball with stat analytics, but I can do basic addition and subtraction. Here goes. Look at these numbers, everybody. This is Eli Tomac's career in Supercross. He started in 2011, made all the races, continued to make all the races. His rookie 450 campaign in 2014, he did miss 8 rounds. And in 2018, he missed a race at Houston, but he didn't totally miss it. He got hurt at Anaheim 1. You might remember the famous crash while leading, and his pants broke and he hurt his shoulder. He showed up for round 2 at Houston and rode practice, but the shoulder pain was too much for him to race that night. But he did show up. And that 2018 round 2 in Houston is the only time a gate has dropped in a 450 Supercross since the beginning of the 2016 season. Tomac was not in it. And his consistency in motocross, just about the same. Look at this. He basically makes all the motos. He missed 2 in his sophomore year. His rookie 450 season, he had a broken collarbone, missed some races, and of course, all those races missed with that crash in 2015. But since then, he has made every single moto. So like I said, I can do math. There have been 445 gate drops that Eli Tomac is eligible for. That's 2 motos every round of Lucas Oil Pro Motocross and a main event in Monster Energy AMA Supercross. 445. And he has showed up for 407 of those gate drops. That is 91%. And I could make that number go even higher. I didn't even count the races so far this year. I could probably count Triple Crown gate drops. And of course, the fact that he did miss the race in Houston, but he kind of was there. I could make the number go even higher. But I don't need to, because any elite athlete in a very injury-prone sport like this who shows up for 91% of the events, games, or races in his career is phenomenally durable. And I don't think that's on accident. First of all, we know that Eli's a pretty smart racer. You don't get to this level without being smart. And then we know his dad, John Tomac, one of the all-time legends of cycling. I say he's the greatest American mountain biker ever, and that's basically based on one stat that I have, which is when I was a kid growing up, he was the only mountain biker who I'd heard of. I don't know if that makes him the GOAT, but it makes him pretty darn good. They analyze this stuff, and I think John, his dad, is smart enough to know the number one thing, even more important than being fast, is not getting hurt. Listen to what he said on the Pulp MX show 2 weeks ago.
Enough, a pretty good amount of knowledge to manage that season, and not just manage one season, but try to string 10 or 12 or 15 of them together, you know. And we're pretty careful on the safety side too with our tracks and what we do in practice. And, you know, sometimes that kind of hurts you because you're not riding really nasty stuff a lot. But I try to always keep, you know, whether it's Eli or anybody else I'm training, my priority is to keep them healthy and not injured. And that's how you build progression. Like if you're always healthy, you can always do your training and always make yourself better, and you're never going backwards, you know. But you have to manage that right. You know, you can easily overdo it. A lot of times the guys that overdo it, they get hurt and they'll be like out for 6 weeks, and they'll come back and they'll realize that they were doing too much.
Yes, not getting hurt, building that base, improving your skills through time. But why don't we think of Eli Tomac as being consistent? Well, it's not just that crash in 2015. It's because Tomac has often been the fastest rider in a series and has not won the title, which means you must not be consistent, right? He was probably the fastest Supercross rider in 2017, maybe 2018, and maybe even 2019, and he didn't win the title in any of those years. But that wasn't because Eli wadded it up, tore his ACL or broke his wrist or separated his shoulder. It's because he just had a few weirdo races where he just didn't ride well. And when those weirdo races happen, if I was making YouTube videos back then, like and subscribe, we would have had all these theories. And I talked about them on podcasts. What's wrong with the guy? Did he choke? Did the pressure get to him? Does he not have heart? But usually when you talk to Eli about those weird races where he just throws down an 8th place finish out of nowhere, he says that he wasn't comfortable, maybe with the track or the motorcycle, and he tightened up and just couldn't ride through it. And that actually is a mark of consistency while he's being inconsistent. Because guess what? I think a lot of riders with the elite speed of Tomac, a lot of the riders who expect to win every race they're in, on a night where they weren't feeling it, and they got pumped up, and they were riding tight, and they weren't comfortable, well, they would still send it, and they'd still try to win the race. And they would crash. Eli would take a 7th or 8th, and then folks like me would come up with all these theories about why he sucked that night. And in reality, an 8th place finish ain't great, but it's not as bad as crashing out of the series with a broken bone. And I believe that Eli has always erred on that side, dare I say, erring on the side of caution. Now, although that seems impossible, because some of Eli's race wins have been so spectacular, he's had so much speed, there's no way we could think of him as the consistent guy or the tortoise instead of the hare. But a lot of his spectacular wins, especially outdoors, won 3 titles in a row, and a lot of those victories came with unbelievable late race charges. I've asked him about that beast mode that we call it at the end of the race, and he says, I don't get faster. The other guys just get tired, and I just maintain the same lap time. Not the most dramatic way to put it. Then we get to the Detroit Supercross on Saturday night. You know, the old Detroit Supercross, who raced in the Pontiac Silverdome, and that was actually a balloon roof, and they had air circulating in the building to keep the roof inflated. Well, it's a good thing we weren't there anymore. Ford Field has a regular, concrete roof, and good thing, because the air was out of the series on Saturday night in Detroit when all of Tomac's primary competitors crashed out of the race. That's Jason Anderson, Cooper Webb, Chase Sexton, and Dylan Ferrandis, for good measure, was out as well. And now Eli is sitting on a ginormous points lead of nearly 2 rounds, just past the halfway mark of the series. And that is because of his consistency. They crashed, they got hurt, he didn't. Now, luckily, Sexton, Webb, and Anderson will all be back this weekend, but now they're nursing injuries. Surely they're not exactly 100%. And that goes back to that Tomac theory. You avoid those bumps and bruises or broken bones, and you're just going to keep on building. He's now the healthiest contender, and he has a healthy points lead. And if the job now is to just bring it home, Eli Tomac, all he's got to do is show up for the races. That is literally his specialty. The numbers do not lie. Now, this is the point where you're going to say, dude, you just jinxed him. You just jinxed Eli Tomac. To which I say, do you really think I have the power to jinx someone sitting in my office talking on a GoPro? And if I did, would I do an Eli Tomac video? Or would I do a video talking about the fact that Vladimir Putin has never had sudden onset health problems? Never. If I could jinx somebody. But I can't. Now, if he keeps this roll going, there will be many more Eli Tomac videos I can put together. Like and subscribe on this YouTube channel. But I can talk about this consistency and this safety and health thing in one other way. Not only the weirdo races where, again, Eli probably could have got a better result but didn't want to risk crashing. Also, Eli has historically not been a good starter, right? And I'm sure a lot of that is a talent. Some riders are good starters, some riders are not. And I think that's the majority of the reason that Eli has never been a whole shot artist throughout his career. It's just not his specialty. But there's also something else to it. To get whole shots or try to get them every week, there is an inherent level of risk. You are the guy who's trying to bar bang your way through in the first turn. You're trying to leave the gas on 1 extra inch and stay off the brakes 1 extra foot. You are pushing the envelope into that first turn every week to get a whole shot. I think Eli Tomac doesn't want to play that game. First of all, he's confident enough to know if he just even starts 5th, he could win the race anyway. Why take that extra 1% risk in turn 1, which sometimes results in whole shots and sometimes results in first turn crashes? It's that mentality. I know he won motos by over a minute. I know he has beast mode, gnarly charges, and elite speed in races. But that doesn't mean that Eli Tomac is a let it all hang out kind of guy. He's actually all-time durable. After that 2015 crash, he has showed up for every single professional supercross and motocross race since, and he has a gigantic points lead. And he's looking to bring it home as the oldest supercross champion ever.